shines a light on Badginton Airport, the veal flights, drug smuggling, and the death of an activist. The mid-90s saw live export thrust into the headlines across England like never before. One of those divisive issues in which non-vegans, welfarists, and even those animal-loving carnists can usually agree upon. A despicable and unnecessary trade. And whilst the floating pits of misery that continue to depart from Australian shores, whom would see their own intermittent time in the spotlight in this country that I will cover, of animals forced to stand in their own waste in the heat with their dying and dead kind. The journey out of England was not quite the multi-week torture trial that we inflict upon cows and sheep in the land down under, though is no more necessary or humane because of it. The banning of the veal crate in England some years earlier had significant impact upon the veal industry. The industry's response? To ship the cows into countries where the practice could still thrive without the minor quibbles of welfarist reform, and a committed but small group of activists who wanted the vile trade to be done with. Though one thing is for sure, the industry was not prepared for the groundswell in public outrage, which, when afforded the right mixture of empathy and a call to action, can achieve anything, though I will save that for another time. Trucking the animals across the Channel in any significant numbers was not an option at this time, due to the aforementioned public outcry. The industry briefly considered ferrying the animals abroad, although anonymous parcel bombs sent to a few select companies put paid to that idea, sending the industry back to the drawing board, though the industry was looking up, literally. Phoenix Aviation accepted the call, with Badginton Airport in Coventry the chosen point of embarkment. Yet for all their tricks and chicanery, the industry had somehow managed to overlook one rather glaringly obvious fact. The animals still had to be driven to the airport. And whilst the transport bottlenecks at the likes of Dover and Calais, providing activists the opportunity to really make a nuisance of themselves, it wasn't exactly hard to give these business operators the business, so to speak, and again, make things as difficult as possible. And airports hadn't yet become the tyrannical security meccas they have morphed into today. A camp of protesters sprung up, there every night amidst the blustering snow and cold. Jill Phipps was among them. February 1st, 1995, there were 100 officers present to keep the peace, or what would be more accurately described as making sure profits were maintained and business proceeded as usual, the night Jill died. The truck drivers and police knew her well, and it was often her to break through the police lines and be the first to delay the trucks. People who knew her said her charm was only matched by her determination and passion to put an end to animal exploitation. The trucks had always stopped, though this time the driver did not. For whatever reason, he kept going, despite the high visibility of Jill and the other protesters. Jill disappeared under the wheel of the truck and died shortly later in her mother's arms. In a despicable show of apathy and cold-heartedness, the police did their best to disperse the incensed protesters and kept the trucks rolling through to their destination that evening. The irony not lost on those who had amassed on the side of compassion and justice that a mother had died, defending the children of other mothers who remained enslaved around the country elsewhere, unable to fight to save their own kin. The media, in a surprising show of respect and compassion, gave Jill a fitting tribute in the aftermath. No, wait a minute, they did the other thing, and trashed the life of a woman campaigning for peace, calling her an obsessive lawbreaker who should have been home with her child instead of out campaigning for animals. Of course, had she stood out in the freezing cold with her son, then they would have attacked her for that too. Don't have any ideas above your station now, ladies. 2 days later, the inquest into Jill's death was opened and adjourned. The movement was angry and frustrated. Tempers were flaring, and those stood on the sidelines feeling helpless felt compelled to act. Jill's father and sister were arrested at the airport, along with 45 other protesters who decided to go a little further than holding signs and attempt to slow down and delay the trucks, spiriting away the innocent to a life of enslavement and death. Jill's partner Justin was arrested for handcuffing himself to the wheels of a plane before it left the tarmac, forcing the plane to remain grounded for safety checks for some time afterwards. Another group of activists broke into Cambridge University, liberating a number of cats destined for spinal testing, dedicating the liberation to Jill's memory. When the inquest into Jill's death was made public, friends and family and fellow activists were incredulous, though not altogether surprised to hear that the driver, and indeed the police, had been fully exonerated of all culpability. A local police constable had said he had seen Jill lay down, placing herself under the wheels of the truck. It was his opinion that she intended to be crushed. It was all her fault, in other words. The fact that countless other activists told a different story mattered not a jot, and there the matter rested. This was, of course, not the first time that the law had saw fit to stick it to Jill without cause. 4 years earlier, Jill had been picked up and arrested under the claim that she had been protesting outside the kennels of the Cheshire Beagles 2 days after the death of fellow activist Mike Hill, whose tale will also be told in a later video. The fact that Jill was 200 miles away collecting her son from school didn't appear to register, and she spent the day in custody in Coventry before being taken to Cheshire, where she was questioned, then charged with riot. She was held in custody for 2 days before bail surety could be confirmed and was summarily released to find her own way home. Jill had spent a further 8 months on bail before the police dropped the charges due to lack of evidence. Thanks to the media's smear campaign, there was a sizable and vocal group of people that balked at the idea of Jill's funeral being held at the Coventry City Cathedral, preferring some back-alley ceremony as the fitting farewell for an animal rights activist. Those dissenting voices were profoundly drowned out by the 1,000-odd crowd that clambered inside and outside of the cathedral to pay their respects. As for Phoenix Aviation, the other as yet unmentioned accomplice in the despicable UK live export flights, the company struggled on for some months after Jill's death, though the tide of public opinion, mounting pressure, and an unrelenting campaign by those committed activists saw the company fall into liquidation soon after. 200 people had been arrested throughout the campaign at Badginton, and over £500,000 of taxpayer money had been spent doing so. The ironic statement from then CEO Christopher Barrett-Jolly, an unscrupulous and unsavoury fiend if ever there was one, as we shall soon learn, said that the animal protesters had not forced our hand, although the decision to cease trading was an economic one brought on by the presence of those very same activists. Not much logic in defeat there, it seems. Taxpayer-funded guards had also been posted at Jolly's house after it was repeatedly attacked. In 1993, one of Phoenix Aviation's pilots was convicted of smuggling cocaine and heroin. Mere months later, the veal flights commenced. Phoenix Aviation were also flying weapons to fuel a civil war in Yemen. Jolly insisted the weapons were going to save lives, whilst at the same time was flying weapons to Angola, another bitter conflict that would last a decade and claim over 1 million lives. In 1994, he was sued for stealing fittings and fixtures from Packington Hall, which he was renting at the time. Then in December, his aging Russian cargo plane was returning for more calves when it slammed into the ground, killing the 5-man crew. Whilst the official verdict was fatigue or pilot error, it was further cause to ground this dirty company. Needless to say, it went unheeded. There were even those amongst the media who claimed the plane was sabotaged by animal rights activists. The authorities, never one to pass up the chance to lambast the movement, didn't even have the gall to run with that one. The previous day, the same plane's navigation equipment had been unable to pick up a nearby passenger jet en route from Brussels to New York, which it narrowly avoided a mid-air collision with. 1995, and Jolly was arrested for shooting one protester, whom he had taken an exception to being filmed by, as well as attacking another with a crowbar. He was also prosecuted for defrauding the Norwich Credit Union, though the piece de resistance was when he and his co-pilot were caught dropping 5 suitcases of smuggled cocaine worth over £20 million as it landed in London upon return from Jamaica. Both were convicted amid a media storm, with Jolly, true to form, even blaming the animal rights for his current predicament. Jolly and his accomplice received 20 years behind bars for their trouble. There are many within the animal rights movement who have not forgotten Jill, nor her courage and commitment to the cause with which we still carry in our hearts each time we set out to make those incremental steps towards the abolishment of the animal holocaust industries. Many activists around the world will commemorate the steadfast determination and resolve that saw Jill lose her life by dedicating liberation actions or vegan educational events that take place on or around the date of her death on February 1st. The world has changed so much in the more than 20 years since Jill left us. Though the road is long and arduous, it will sadly be littered with bitter tales and heartbreak along the way, though nothing worth fighting for is ever readily ceded by those whose interests are in keeping the status quo intact. The time is now. Get vegan, get involved, and get active. Until next time.
We put our lives on hold for this, and we will be until it stops.
Even if someone gets hurt?
Yes. Someone will eventually get hurt.
An animal rights protester has been killed trying to stop the export of live calves.